Okay, absent people, the first question we're playing with is, why is the fact that China is Confucian? Why is that surprising? You have enough knowledge already, especially with Liu Bang yesterday, to appreciate that question. Discuss amongst yourselves, and I'm going to stay here and listen to you. Why is it surprising? Sorry, absent people, I paused it. I just got to stop doing that. So we're going to talk about the Han and the Western Han, its solutions. Notice there are like 4 main ideas that I just put there. That's sort of a spoiler, though, so I really don't want to do it. So we'll talk about Liu Bang first. As we talked about last time, being a peasant, he was a Taoist. Being a Taoist, he was rowdy, anti-Confucian, and as we saw in his peeing on the Confucian, he was not afraid to show that anti-Confucianism. Use this language. Those of you who want to use sophisticated language when you discuss revolutionary periods, it is the language of revolutionary cycles. When you have just come through a civil war, the first thing you have to do is literally consolidate your reign. The consolidation phase, right? Because there has been chaos and disorder and all sorts of stuff. It's been civil war. There's no government now because we just threw it over, right? We've got to like shape a new system. So that's the consolidation phase. So what did Liu Bang do when he took power in the Han? All founders, Mao Zedong did the same thing, right? I just overthrew the Republic of China, they ran to Taiwan, and I've got to make a new state. How do I do that? The consolidation phase. We always ask that question every time a new dynasty starts, and it's always interesting to watch these guys. God, I just succeeded, I won, I'm like the emperor now. How do I make this work? And they have to like problem solve. It's really interesting stuff. So, as we saw last time, and just to repeat, because this is also really cool to watch, he kept Qin centralized bureaucracy only in the West. Remember the map? We saw that? We looked at that? On the western side, he kept the commanderies, but on the eastern side, he gave feudal states to vassals. So he sat the fence. Did we look at that last time? Oh, okay, well, let me show that to you. It's totally suspenseful at this point. Yeah. We didn't look at this at all? Okay, apologies. The other class did. Here's where we've been. Look at the Shang, look at the Zhou, look at Qin. Look at China filling up. You see China proper. You remember those concentric circles of China proper expanding from the Yellow River. So look at expanding here. Look what you've seen so far. Look at why did Qin have to make commanderies and such? Not only because he wanted to, of course, disempower any counter-revolutionaries, but also because he conquered all the way down to here, right? China's down next to modern-day Vietnam now. And then the Han. Liu Bang ends up, well, with Han Wudi, they end up taking, so we're starting to see China minus Tibet and the Taklamakan, Xinjiang, Muslim and Tibetan regions. This is where China is, like, developed China is today. So the Han basically captures that. That's just sort of an overview of where we've been. This is Liu Bang's compromise. After Liu Bang conquered, what do I do? Now think about this, it's interesting. The traditional normal thing is feudalism. It lasted for 900 years under the Zhou. Qin Shi Huang's a radical. Doing this centralized government with commanderies and such, that's a radical thing. It only lasted 15 years. So Liu Bang has to make a decision here. And he splits the fence. Tell me why. Notice he put Qin-style commanderies on the left. So these are centralized states that he runs, and he appoints governors just like Qin did. So he keeps Qin's system. This is a very good clue here. The capital is right here. The Western Zhou capital, in the same place that the Qin capital was on the Wei River. The Western Han capital on the Wei River. So he surrounds himself with centralized commanderies. But he gives feudal states to his helpers, other generals who he does not want to alienate. He gives them fiefs, vassals. He sits the fence. Why? Do you think it was smart for him to surround himself with centralized states? Obviously, right? It's a buffer zone. So if these guys want to attack me, they've got to like come through quite a bit of territory in order to do that. The story behind, I don't know, you did read it in that 2-page thing on the fate of the peeing on the Confucian's hat. But being a peasant and having just a bunch of peasant soldiers and generals with him, when he won and he's got a capital and all that sort of thing, he builds a palace. And because an emperor has to have a palace. And he's a peasant. And so all of his peasant homies are in the palace with him. They're literally having drinking parties. The Chinese have always, and look, the ritual ceremonies, there's nothing wrong with drinking. Drinking only really became a sin when automobiles were invented. Before that, you were just clumsy. Automobiles made drinking criminal because they kill people. Suddenly drinking is like a horrible thing because we're in the age of cars. Before that, you know, you'll fall off your horse, but you're certainly not going to, like, you know, you're not going to, like, have a head-on collision on your horse because your horse has eyes. It's going to, like, so anyways. So they're having, you know, it's like, yay, hey, woo, nice to be the emperor. Let's drink, let's have parties. I built a nice new palace. And his fellow soldiers, his troops and his generals and such, are just, it's just a frat house, a fraternity house. They're just like, you know, drinking, chugging, and they're taking, and this is all in a historian, they're taking sword practice and axe practice on his nice columns, right? They're getting drunk and they're literally like hacking up the furniture drunk. And Liu Bang is like, oh, Jesus, I just, you know, look what they're doing to my furniture. And this is when the Confucian whose hat he peed in came and famously said, "It is easy to conquer on horseback, but it is not easy to lead. I can teach you the value of ritual so that they won't disgrace you. You have to have a, you know, nobility to you when you're the emperor." And so, and as you read, Liu Bang was like, just make it easy. I'm a peasant, I can't read. And so this is the kind of thing that Liu Bang instituted in the palace. And so now in the presence of the emperor, his formerly drunk homies are now doing the Zhou thing, the ritual kowtowing and such. And so that imposed order. Those are just cool pictures. Sorry, I just like it. That's a Forbidden City. Of course, that's completely off because the Forbidden City is a Ming Dynasty thing. Okay, so back to, come on, slow computer. So yeah, so he did that, right? He split it. Back to his consolidation. Split. Feudal, centralized 50-50. Ideological. Now, we've already talked about this last time. I'm a peasant, so surely I'm not going to really be into bookish Confucianism. I'm semi-literate at best. I'm a victim of Qin legalism. We all know how that ended, so we're not going to do that. We haven't talked about Taoism because I'm doing it more slowly this semester. You know that you have 3 less lessons than last semester because of the calendar? Semester 2 has less lessons, less days. I actually have to throw out 3 lessons. It's about a week. Anyway, the Wu Wei that we just talked about now, non-coursive action. Liu Bang is a Taoist. His mom was a Taoist. And he takes that approach. He rules like a shadowy presence. That's from the Tao Te Ching. Do nothing. Be like a shadow. So small government, those of you who are Republicans, small government Republicans, or better still, libertarians, who say that the government should just stay totally out of people's way, that's an American conservative position, libertarian, small government. Taoism's very libertarian. So what did that mean? He made the taxes low, consolidating. Look, those peasants, they built the Great Wall, they've gone through war, the farmlands are in disarray. Just let them farm. Keep the taxes low. His court life was simple, not luxurious. There was no military draft. There were no massive labor projects. He was still. He just he didn't coerce. He didn't do anything. And Qin's laws, he simplified Qin's laws. Qin had a huge law code. Qin's laws, there were a lot of them. He simplified them to 3. Don't kill, don't steal, and I forget the 3rd one. But, so he's trying to do it because Qin's laws were criticized for being very, very complicated. Way too complex. So on. If that was his consolidation, if he started with as a Taoist who was politically split, half feudal, half Qin centralized, half traditional, half modern, basically, and if he was low taxes, small government, he did have still this problem. The Great Wall was built, and by the way, well, we'll get there. The Xiongnu, right? The nomads to the north, that's why the Great Wall was built. Do you think Qin Shi Huangdi wanted to say, hey, 300,000 people, go die building the Great Wall? You think he wanted to say that? No, but you've got these steppe nomads up there who do invade and raid, and you got to do something about it. This is why the steppe nomads are always so important in China's history. Qin fell, basically. My take is Qin fell because of the Xiongnu. If he didn't have to build the Great Wall because of their invasions, he wouldn't have angered the people so much, and revolution probably would not have happened. But he had to, he felt. Well, they're still up there. So that's one problem. How does a Taoist deal with badass horsemen to the north? Second, those feudal peers who were in the eastern part, who he gave vassal states. We know how they're a threat, right? They can do the same thing that happened in the Western Zhou. Third, you relax the laws. Sounds good in theory, but if I relax the laws and say, okay, you don't have to, there's only three, don't kill anybody and don't steal. Well, you're going to be all like, pinching women. I can pinch women now. I'm kidding. Gangsterism starts breaking out. Because there's really no law enforcement, that sort of thing. And bullies, who start just exploiting the peasants, bullying the peasants. And then finally, the fourth problem that he faced, challenge, was he was a peasant. And Yao Shun and Yu, notwithstanding, Shun the peasant, nobles are not going to look at a peasant who can't read as a legitimate ruler. They did not respect him, and you have to have legitimacy in order to keep your power. We talked about how low class his court was, right? His followers were all just Tennesseans. We talked about it's easier to conquer than to rule. And we talked about the first opening for Confucianism. Now notice, that's just the first opening. So here's Confucianism like, wow, I've got a toehold on, for the first time, a ruler taking me seriously. So in short, Liu Bang dies after only 10 years after taking over. He lets everything be. He's very Taoist. He just lets things be. The empire does recover. The Han does recover. You let the people work and farm and tend to their families and their villages and all that sort of thing. They want to prosper. They want to eat. And so it works. But those four problems are still there. And they're going to fester. I'm going to, very briefly, the next three emperors don't matter, but why not? Because it's kind of interesting to watch them, like, okay, Daddy was a Taoist, I've got to be filial piety, at least I've got to be filial. Even the Taoists are like, be good to your father, right? This is way too ingrained. And so, his son, Emperor Wen, he's called the do-nothing emperor, which in Taoism is a good thing, right? He was total wu-wei. Like Gandhi, he dressed in homespun. An emperor not wearing silk robes, not lording it up, living in luxury. He's like Gandhi wearing homespun, homemade, unbleached, undyed hemp clothing, living this simple life. And so he did not do anything. Xiongnu up there, oh well, on and on and on. And some of the vassals start becoming disloyal. The third Han Emperor, Jing, he starts becoming more active. Some of the vassals did become disloyal, and so Jing barely defeated them in a war, and he starts declaring some laws. And so you see it took 3 generations. In the third generations, they were like, all right, this Taoism thing, that's kind of hard to really put into practice. We need more laws than 3. It's killing me what that third law is. And then finally, bam. Han is just the empire name. Wu is, you'll often see him just called Wu or Wudi. The third longest serving emperor in Chinese history. And one of the 3 or 4 most important. Qin Shi Huangdi is definitely important. King 1 is important. Wudi is on that level of importance. So he is assertive. He does tackle the problems. So watch him go. This is the man. Whenever you see the word legacy, don't touch. I'm just looking at you, smiling, looking at his, and I'm wondering why. Whenever you see the word legacy, that means long-lasting influence. That means, you know, perk up. This word is used over and over in history classes, and whenever you see it, you should be like, okay, that's what paying attention to. His reforms defined China until 100 years ago. So here's where traditional China really does take its shape and start. He finishes the mold. So what are his main legacies? First of all, the Silk Road. I have a separate. Here's the Great Wall that Qin built. And I'll just tell you, these green arrows going up, those are Chinese invasions into the steppe. And Wudi does it. He starts sending armies up there, find those damn Xiongnu, and he conscripts. So look at, no Taoism here. Daddy didn't create armies, Granddaddy, Liu Bang, he didn't. Han Wudi's make a massive army and send it up there to find those bastards and destroy them. I am sick of these Xiongnu. And so you see this going up, and then they come running back home. No, those two go up in 119 during Wudi's reign, and they come running back down here. All of these red, those are the Xiongnu, just constantly, because they're nomadic, just hitting left, right, center constantly. What does that do? To China. The nomads are too mobile. The army can't beat them. Armies have wagon trains and supplies and all sorts of stuff. Nomads, they carry what they eat on their horse with them, right? There's no wagons, so they just like ride like the wind. Armies are slow, so they can't do it. He fails. So instead, he starts garrisoning, putting army forts along the Great Wall. Army bases. I was stationed in Germany in an American army base. I was at a garrison there, right? Army bases are expensive. They require a lot of money. They take sons away from fathers and families and husbands and all sort of thing. But he found it necessary to do that, all the way out to the Taklamakan Desert. Garrisons, 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 garrisons. And this is our Taklamakan here. That's why I taught you the Taklamakan in the first place. Look at the yellow. That's the Xiongnu. This is their range. And the Han here. And notice Wudi starts garrisoning out here. Obviously, the unintended consequence, keep the Xiongnu out. I'm sorry, the intended consequence. We're just fighting the Xiongnu. We just want to like keep them from invading. But look at the unintended consequence. It's massive. The Silk Road. Traders start seeing this. Wow, this is cool. There's armies just like guarding over 1,000 miles into Central Asia from the capital. So we can take our silk and our other products, and we can just go along the garrison route and sell stuff to Central Asia and import stuff from Central Asia. We can make a lot of money. And so the Silk Road starts. It's not like somebody said, hey, let's make a Silk Road. Here's a pretty good map. It goes from Xi'an, or the Han, Western Han capital, over to Persia, to Baghdad, and finally to Rome. Now, there's middlemen all the way through, particularly here in Central Asia, Samarkand and Fergana over here. Notice, here's the Taklamakan here. It's actually almost farther west than India, the Taklamakan. So China really does go almost as far west as India does. But then at this point, there's some pretty hardcore Afghanistan types, Taliban types, even way back then. And so they're the middlemen. You don't go farther than that. You give them your silks, they buy them from you, and they sell them to, at a markup to the Westerners. And Roman glass is found in Han tombs. And Han silks are found in Roman tombs and Egyptian tombs. And just a little bit of trivial, interesting stuff. Rome was so in love with China. Is geography destiny? China had mulberry trees and silkworms. No other geography had silkworms and mulberry trees, which is what's needed to make silk. And so when the Romans saw silk, they were like, good God, that's gorgeous. And the wives of the patricians, the senators, the patricians, the elites, they were like, good God, that's gorgeous, get me some silk. And the senators and patricians themselves wore silk robes. Gold just flowed out of Rome over to the Silk Road into China. And it drained the Roman Empire of gold and is partly a cause of the fall of the Roman Empire. They spent their money on Chinese stuff. It's kind of like America today, right? Happy Meals. No, that's a Stephen Colbert joke. Never mind. Thank you, China, for making our Happy Meals possible. He said, I don't get the joke. No, these luxury goods, they only benefited the court, meaning the royal, the imperial, and the wealthy. And there are problems there. Because notice, Confucius is saying, don't live for profit, don't live for luxury. The Taoists are saying, live simply. But suddenly there's just all of this gold coming in from the Silk Road. And you'll see that will have some consequences later when Jesus comes. So, what's our thesis here?
Unintended consequences.
Okay, the unintended consequences. Second, besides that Silk Road, this is hugely important. As I said, army bases cost money. We like small government in China, and the peasants are not to be exploited. The mandate of heaven stuff, it's deep in our roots now. So if you're not going to tax the peasants, then who are you going to tax in order to fund your army bases? Merchants. Unintended consequences of that. Merchants aren't stupid. They live for profit. They're like, well, there's no profit in buying and selling anymore because they're taxing that. So I'm going to take that money and invest it in land. Because agriculture is not taxed on the same level as luxury goods. And what is the consequence of that? Mao Zedong, in 1949, when he founds the Communist China, has a population, 90% of which is peasants who cannot read. He's got a capitalist United States that hates him and wants nothing more than to bring him down in the Cold War. He's got to consolidate. And from the day of Wudi to this day, 1949, China is mostly agricultural. Why did China not go commercial? Because Wudi sort of, with this tax policy, which was just the Xiongnu again, how do I keep those damn nomads out? I need money for army bases. And so China will remain agrarian. That agrarian society thing, it's boring, I know. It's beautiful, I know too, and you don't because you don't think about it. Some of you might, but it's beautiful because it's an agricultural society that has these traditions that are just gorgeous and innocent and such. And I love the Chinese working class to this day because there's an innocence about them. Finally, he creates government monopolies. Okay. So finally, what's the last thing he does? It totally ticks the Confucians off. He monopolizes the most profitable industries in China. Wine, the Chinese love their drink, and so do the ancestors. Wine was a massive industry. You want to make money, you just start a rice winery. Because everybody buys wine, they like their drink. Not anymore, you can't because the government does it. So you can't do wine sales. That's a government monopoly. Same with iron and salt. So we see, why do I point these things out? Those of you who are interested in communism and all that modern stuff, look how far back the roots go. You'll see over and over, and we haven't even gotten to the real Karl Marx in the middle of the Han. Yeah, so there's the who cares, right? Markets aren't free in China. Wudi sets the precedent. Modern world. Finally, government. How do we solve this split between feudalism and centralized bureaucracy? Wudi does it. I told you the Achilles heel of Zhou feudalism. If you can trace that from the Zhou feudalism to the Qin centralization to Liu Bang splitting the fence to this guy, you are done and you understand how Qin not only won in terms of commanderies with a centralized bureaucracy, but Wudi improved it. This is massively important. Make your font real big because it's the end of the class, and I know that you've been listening for quite a while. Don't fade out on this point. This is the most important point of the cementing of China. Not only did he centralize it, which is just making it like Qin Shi Huangdi. I'm not even going to go into the how he did it. It's kind of fun, but it's not real important. Oh, I've got 4 minutes. I will. In a nutshell, he did this. So I've got all these big vassal states, right? I don't want to piss off the vassals by like saying, hey, give me back your state, Catherine. That's going to anger Catherine. So instead I'm going to change the law. No longer does your estate, when you die, go to your oldest son, primogeniture. No longer. Now you have to divide it amongst your surviving sons. What happens to Catherine's estate if she has 10 sons, which is not unusual in a land of concubines? If she dies, what happens to her estate? It's 10 times smaller, right? There's 10 little states now. They have sons. What happens? So you see it like in 2-3 generations. That is so jujitsu ninja. I'm sorry, that's just so ninja. Because then it's easier to come in and gobble, 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 these little bitty states, right? Ending primogeniture and causing them to be divided amongst the sons equally. Here's the big thing, finally. Out with the Taoism and in with the Confucianism. He adopted Confucianism. And that means he adopted the Western Zhou ritual system of the Shu Jing, the Yao Shun and Yu ideal, the mandate of heaven, the whole bit, because Confucius was all about Yao Shun and Yu and the Shu Jing, the Confucian classics. So this is the guy that did it, and it's astonishing if you think about it. Why is the fact that China's Confucian surprising? Because it took until this guy in 100 BC to do it. Confucius died of failure. Oh, we just talked about that. From this guy's time on, from 130 on, China will remain a Confucian bureaucracy. So our social pyramid now, it's easy. Spam is your word, S-P-A-M, because now on top of that social pyramid is scholar officials. Scholars, scholars. You want to join the elite and be on top? You're a scholar. If you're a merchant, you're on the bottom. If you're a rich merchant, you're on the bottom in terms of honor. You don't get into the National Honor Society by making a lot of money. You get into the National Honor Society by being a skillful scholar. Good at the 6 arts, too. China will be ruled by scholars for 2,000 years. This is another reason I love this civilization. Because you have to be smart, disciplined, studious, and Confucian to join the elites. That's beautiful to me. And Wudi did it. Here's our last point. Well, how do I find these scholars? Well, I'm Wudi. I'm going to start a university, the Imperial Academy. And if anybody wants a job in my government, which is the only way to be an elite, they've got to pass a test where they talk about the things that you've read. Yao Shun and Yu, the Book of Songs, on and on. Stop being absent.